All right. Any other questions, Pam?
No other questions.
All right. So Tony, during the radio show last week, we touched on 5 areas where people lose money unknowingly and unnecessarily, and where they have what we call that wealth transfer. Can you touch on those 5 areas?
The 5 main areas are housing expense, taxes, your registered savings plans, and your education, and also major purchases. I'm going to cover the first 3, and then I'll let James take over for the following 2.
Okay.
The housing expense, I have a question for everybody. When will you stop paying for your housing expense? Okay, it's great to have a mortgage, and when you pay it off, that's fantastic, but will the utility bills stop? Will the property taxes stop? Will you need to do renovations? There's a constant flow that we are spending on our housing expense, so it doesn't end at all. However, a lot of people really focus on paying down that mortgage in a hurry, which is a good thing, but paying it down, and as far as I'm concerned, it's like paying it down and it's a solid brick, and then you hope you were going to be able to access it later.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize to access equity in their homes, the banks lend on cash flow as opposed to just the equity. Like, you have to have money to support that drawdown or draw out of the house. A lot of people don't realize that.
Correct. That's a big fallacy. There's so many people that tell me, oh, I've got equity in my house. I can, when I need money, I can go and tap it. And it's like, well, if you can qualify, and qualifying means you usually have income to almost every time, saying that you have income to cover that.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a house worth over $1 million, but if you don't have the income to support drawing equity, you might be only draw a fraction of it. I mean, there's other vehicles like reverse mortgages and things like that, but that's for another topic. Okay, sorry, Tony, interrupted. So move on to your next one. I think it's taxes.
Yeah, the next one's taxes. I've got a question for everyone out there. What does the government produce? Well, really, they produce nothing, but they do spend on social programs, on multiple things. Ironically, taxes were introduced as a temporary measure to pay off World War I debts 100 years ago, but that temporary tax is still around, which a lot of people don't, it's just common now.
It's a long war, it seems.
Yeah, a very long war. Most of us want to pay our fair share of taxes. For those that don't want to pay, the government will gladly accept more money from you. You just cut them a check and they have no problem saying thank you very much. So taxes is another area that a lot of people don't realize the impact on their savings and their future lifestyle.
Yeah, and we just had an election this week, and with a minority government, with COVID bills, we're going to see our taxes go up at every level. Federal, likely provincial, as well as local and municipal. I mean, they're going to go for those property tax evaluations, and ties into your housing expense argument. Things are going to get more expensive down the road. For sure. So sorry, I keep jumping in there, Tony. How about registered plans, RRSPs, RRIFs, things like that?
Yeah, registered savings plans and retirement income funds when you hit 71. Basically, those are vehicles that are tax deferring vehicles. A better word should be tax postponement, because today we're at the lowest historical level of taxation in our country, and it's nice to get a deduction today, but the thing is, in reality, you're getting peanuts for what they're going to take out of us later when you go to pay. The government CRA is a silent partner with us. They just can't wait. They let us take all the risk on our investments, let it grow, and then they turn around and take the money. When we take the money out, they actually take a percentage of it. But we don't know what that percentage is. They're going to tell us when they feel like it down the road. Unfortunately, planning around that is very fluid, and it would be very hard to guess. However, where we are today at the lowest point, one of the lowest points in history, it's inconceivable to see that it's not going to be at higher than we are today. So that will take out a chunk of money. You feel like you have a lot in your registered savings plans. A lot of people do, because we've been programmed that that's what we have to do, especially every February, the first first 60 days of the year to put it in to get a bit of a savings, but the amount of savings that you're getting will be very small in comparison to what you're going to be paying down the road, especially that you've grown those assets over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of financial plans play off of the, you'll be in a lower marginal tax rate when you retire. There's no guarantee of that. I mean, look what we're going through right now with the election. All I have to do is dial up the marginal tax rate a little bit, and that just brings in so much more money for the government. And then, the government at the end of the day has a vested interest in your RRSPs. I mean, they're looking for, as you said, for the client, it's a postponement. It's also deferred revenue for the government, and they see that money coming in. They'll see it coming in, and that'll be a source of revenue for them. And I think one thing that people don't realize is when you have two spouses and one passes away, and you transfer tax-free to the surviving spouse, all of a sudden, if they both had, like, say, 500,000 hypothetically in a RSP, now the surviving spouse has $1 million, and there's the required withdrawal, so you can't game it. You have to take a certain amount out, and that could affect entitlements like old age security.
Correct. And I actually have had clients that have been very successful on the outside, and they're happy to be successful, and I'm happy for them. But they've saved their money in RSPs, and they've built up a nest egg outside, rental properties and some other income that they're getting from small pensions here and pensions there combined. And amazingly enough, they have so much income that once they start riffing or retirement income fund from Canadians that are forced to do that, they basically were writing checks directly to Revenue Canada for what was coming out. So they took the risk, they grew it, and bye-bye, the money went.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, I think we're going to move on here, Tony, because we could probably spend a whole show on RSP RIFs and taxation. So I'm going to move on to James. James, you're going to handle education expense. Tell us how that works and how that's a wealth transfer to clients.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Well, I don't have questions for the attendees, but I do have to say that education is pretty expensive. I have 2 kids myself, so education costs can be as high as $20,000 a year. With 2 kids, that's $40,000 there. And we have a great tool, which is an RRSP, but it's not enough to cover the education expense itself. So it can be very expensive, like I say.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. The RRSP is a good vehicle. I mean, you get the credit from the government. It helps you kind of top things up. It's essentially free money coming in. But what people don't realize is that has to be invested in something, again, kind of like going back to Tony's earlier illustration of the safe tank and the risk tank. So if you want that money to grow, it should be in some kind of growth instrument, call it an equity mutual fund or something. But then as you approach the need to use it, you have to dial that back. And the question becomes, when do you move from the risk to the non-risk? And it becomes kind of messy. And then the other thing is, when that money comes out, it's taxable in the beneficiary's hands, which is great because usually students are in a lower tax bracket. But what if they have a summer job or have a good, I work construction university, you can make some pretty good money in the summertime. All of a sudden you get bumped into a new tax bracket, and that can affect your RRSP income and total income. That's
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to major capital purchases. James, what do you classify as major capital purchases?
So the first question is, what is major capital purchases? So anything that you cannot pay in full with your monthly cash flow, that will be your major capital purchases. So there are 2 types, the planned ones and the unplanned ones. So what are they? The planned ones usually is like when you're planning to buy a car, or you're planning for a vacation, or you're planning for a wedding. Those are your planned major capital purchases. But as for the unplanned ones, usually the surprises. Suddenly you have a leak in your roof, or your car breaks down, and then you have to fork out a big chunk of money for that. That will be your unplanned major capital purchases.
Okay. So how would one go about, I guess, covering those purchases? I mean, the planned ones, yeah, we can, put some money aside. Like we see the safe tank here. How do we pay for these planned and unplanned purchases? Are there different strategies?
Yeah, well, the common ones are that there are two ways to pay for your major capital purchase. One is you borrow from a lender, and the other one would be paying cash, which you drain your own savings. So by paying by borrowing from a lender, you're pretty much paying interest, and that can be expensive depending on the interest rate, right? And then the other one would be paying by cash, which potentially you will lose a lot of interest that you can grow over time for that. So that will be pretty much the two ways of paying for your major capital purchases.
So it sounds like maybe the best strategy, if it's possible, would be keep your if you have cash set aside, don't use it. And we've talked about this before, where you collateralize the savings or the safe tank, and then use monthly cash flow to pay off the borrowed funds, and that leaves the savings to continue to compound uninterrupted. That'd be the best strategy out of all of them.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that we did our first webinar. That was the wealth creator profile, because the saver would be the person who saves and then spends and then saves again for the next purchase, whereas the spender borrows and then pays back, and the wealth creator uses both strategies, other people's money and lets their money compound.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.